Welcome to a new episode of Data Director tutorial videos. This time it is about a life-saving feature in Data Director. So it may happen that after some bulk operation, for example an import or any script which changes some data, it may happen that a lot of data is wrong afterwards. This can be caused by some errors in the mapping, in the import mapping, or it could be that the import file contained some wrong data. But in the end, you will have a lot of missing data or wrong data in your data objects. And now the challenge is how to restore it. But maybe you even recognize this problem only 1 week later, while in the meantime, other data has been maintained. So the challenge is how to restore the data which has been, or which is now wrong, to a previous state while keeping the data which has been maintained in between. So what are the options? The first option which may come to your mind is restore database dump. But in most cases this is the worst decision because all data which has been maintained in the meantime will be lost. And this does not only apply to the data object which has now wrong data, but it applies to all classes, all documents, all assets, in fact, everything in your Pimcore. So restoring database dump is in most cases no option if you recognize the error sometime after it occurred. Second option is restore data based on Pimcore versions, because there the data is available. So Pimcore has a versioning system which allows to restore data to a previous state, but with Pimcore's default version restore feature, you can only restore all class fields to a previous state. And you can only restore an old version for one object at a time. So the challenge is, what if you want to only restore some fields while maintaining others like as they are in the current state? And second challenge is how to restore version data of multiple objects. And today I'd like to show you how Data Director can help you with those challenges. I've prepared a Pimcore system with some e-commerce data or product data. For this I have two classes, a brand class, which only has a name and a reverse relation to products, and a products class where we have some basic fields for a product class. And I've set up some imports, namely some for the brands and for the products. Do not like to get in detail here, but in the end you will have this structure which you see here on the left side. We have the brand objects on the first level, and below there are the product objects on the second level. Let's have a look at these objects. They have an SKU, a price, a name, and a description, an English name description, and a brand object in a relation. This is here for all the products. They have similar data. Of course, different data, but same fields are filled. Now imagine that in an import or in any script which you have created, does not even have to be related to Data Director, you have done a mistake and the data in the English name is now wrong. I can now fake this situation by simply hard coding a wrong value to the English name. And when I now execute this import, then we will see here that the name got changed now to the wrong value. Well, English name. Now let's look at the object. Refresh. English name has the wrong value. Now let's imagine that in the meantime, after the error got introduced, some data maintainers edited the images. So for example, they assigned 2 images here, saved, and they didn't see the error because in the real world this could be on multiple tabs or whatever. With custom layers, they maybe would not even see this field. Anyway, there is some data which has been maintained manually. And when you now want to restore the English name, of course, we want to keep the manually maintained data. Now let's have a look at the versions. First, we need to find out what caused the error. We can do this by comparing the versions. When we look here at the English name, we see it was already wrong there. When we compare those versions, we see here the error got introduced. So with the version node, we see that data port 2 caused this problem. Of course, we already knew this in this fake case, but in the real world, we would not. So now we know how the error occurred, and we could fix it in the data port. But the problem still is how to restore this old data. In this case, of course, you could also simply re-import the data, but in the real world, this may not be possible. Even if the data error did not get introduced by an import, but by a bulk operation, which has nothing to do with an import. Anyway, the challenge is how to restore the English name to the original value and keeping the currently assigned 2 images. And this is where Data Director comes into play. We can now right-click this version which had the correct English name, click Publish, and then we see a new pop-up window. This is not Pimcore default, this is because Data Director is installed. In this pop-up window, we can define what to restore. The path of the current object is already filled in here. Also the date of the clicked version, which we want to restore. And now we can define which fields to restore. In our case, we only want to restore the English name. If you are unsure what would happen, there's even this dry run checkbox named Data Review. So this will only show you what would be restored without really saving the restored data. When you now click Restore, we see another window, and we see here that the English name would get restored from wrong value to A women's get address, and no other fields would be restored. So if we are sure that this is the correct operation, we can remove this dry run checkbox and we can restore the data. Again, this is the same. And when we now reload the object, we see a new version here. It has version node restored from version 986, which is this one. And when we compare it to the previous one, then we see that the English name got corrected and the 2 images are still inside. Let's look here. English name got restored, images are still there. But of course, this is only a partly solution, because if you have really damaged thousands of objects, you cannot click into every single object and restore the damaged fields to a previous state. In this case, you also need a bulk operation. And this can be done by right-clicking a parent object, and in the advanced section there is now a new point restore version. This time our base object for restoration is products, but we can add a filter condition. As predefined options here, there's only this object, which does not make sense for a folder, but there's also children and descendants of this object. If we select this, it would restore everything below, but we can define which fields to restore. We automatically see here the fields of objects which are below the selected folder. So in our case, there are brand objects and there are product objects. Now, we only want to restore the English name. To even narrow the selection of objects to restored, you can also enter here an SQL condition. For example, if you add key like A, which means the object name begins with an A, it will only restore objects whose object name begins with an A. Of course, this is only an example. In the real world, it would be check for modification date, for example, or where the English name is this wrong value because the other ones do not need to be restored maybe. So here you can enter any filter condition. And then we need to set the date to restore. When you go to with this context menu, then the date is automatically filled to the current date. Of course, this needs to be changed. In our case, the error occurred on the 4th of April at 8, let's copy this, at 8 past 8. But maybe the other objects got saved before, so we should add a little buffer. Let's look at the import run. We see here that this error got introduced between 23 seconds and then it ran until 58 seconds. And so we should set it to the start date of the data port. Then we can be sure that all data objects which were changed in this object will get set back. Now again, we are cautious. We want to review the data first. And when we let it run, and here we see that wrong values for those objects get all set back, rolled back to the previous value. So now when we are sure that this is correct, we can remove the data review checkbox and restore it really with including saving the objects. And now it will really restore the data. And when we now look, for example, at this object which we had before, we now see that also the original value got restored. Now to summarize the enterprise features concerning imports in Data Director, we have ways to set up very flexible import setups. With completely flexible mapping, you can implement whatever logic you want. We have a way of easily executing the data ports, for example, when you add it to the main menu. And then can execute the data ports. We have an easily to understand process window, a summary window, where you see error section if some happen, or you see the changes to objects. So this is easily usable also by non-tech people. We have the traceability features so that you can open the data ports, have a look at the used import files with the import archive. You can check on the product level which data port runs caused errors or whatever happened. So with this time you can see exactly which run it was. You can look at the used import file to track down causes of errors. And of course we have monitoring and alerting. So if any error occurs during imports, you will automatically see it here in the history panel, but you will also get alerted via email. And now there is this new feature of restoring versions, which fills the gap if an error occurred during an import. So now you can also restore versions, and not only versions, but also single fields of versions. And this makes a complete picture of all the different aspects of imports. I hope you like this feature about restoring versions. It has multiple times saved our clients from more damage, and I hope you will not come into the situation that you need it, but in case you do, then you have this feature. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye until next time. Bye-bye.